Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Women in the Word. There we are. I can now see you. And hello, Pam. It's lovely to see you as well. For those who are here, it's great to see you. And for those who will be watching later, it's great to see you as well. This is a wonderful day. We've got a beautiful autumn day. It's just about winter in the southern hemisphere here, and it's actually going to be summer in the northern hemisphere. So if you're in the southern hemisphere, grab your hot drinks because it is a bit chilly this morning. So we've got a wonderful series for you. We've been doing the Women of Samson series, and we started last year, and so with the wife of Samson. So he's who we're talking on today, in conjunction with Our Lady. And it's really, really interesting. We are mentioning the third woman in Samson's life that is mentioned in the Bible, not the second. We're going to leave the woman at Gaza and we're going to jump straight into Delilah. And is she a delight? She's a great discussion point. And we've got lots of questions of which I didn't have the answers. So we're going to, hopefully you had the answers for me today. So I'm hoping we're having lots of talk on this lady. And we want to know what, who she is, of course. What does her name mean? How was she involved with Samson? How did God use her to bring about the downfall of Samson or the downfall of the Philistines? It's really, really interesting how God used this lady for his purpose. But before we start, if I could get Norma, are you able to pray for us today?
Oh, Heavenly Father, we're so indebted to you. And we just thank you for your love for us. We thank you for the freedom and the privilege to study your word. And we ask that your anointing would rain down on Michelle today and open up our hearts to receive and to study your word and to find out more wonderful gems from the Holy Scriptures. We just thank you for this morning and for your blessing over all of us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you for that beautiful prayer. So where are we in the Torah portion? We are week 35. It is Naso. It means to take a census. So there's still another census being taken. Or it means to life, to carry, to take. And that is more in description for what we are talking about today. So it is Bamidbar, Numbers, which is what Bamidbar means in the Hebrew, chapter 4, verses 21 to chapter 7 to verse 89. So let's have a look at who our questions, which are, give us some interest into our teaching today. So is Delilah a Philistine? Have you ever thought if she's a Philistine, or is she an Israelite, or is she something else? How do we know? Was Samson married to Delilah? Now, how many of you think she was? Did Delilah cause Samson to negate his Nazirite status? So what are we talking about today? We're talking about Samson. Samson is a Nazirite or a Nazir. And we're going to find that out in the Torah portion, Numbers chapter 6, verses 1 to 8. And so what does it take to be a Nazirite? So let me have a look. And it means separated or consecrated person. And it means the person who does not drink wine or strong drink, does not eat any unclean thing, does not cut their hair. And we're going to find that today the hair becomes very significant. Do not touch the dead. And it was voluntary, but in this case, his mother was told that she would be that her son would be a Nazirite from conception, right? And she adds to the end of his life. It's really interesting. If you go back and look at Numbers chapter 13, and we spoke on Samson's mother, which her name is hang on, I've got it. It's Zilphonis. That's it. Zilphonis, Zealphonnis. Yes, we did find her name. And of course, his father is Manoah. And if you want to go back and read the story, so it goes from chapter 13 of Judges to chapter 16 of Judges. But we will be in Judges chapter 16, verses 4 to 20 today, because that is the uptake of the story of Delilah. She's a very interesting lady, of course. We never bring a boring lady, do we? And never bring a boring lady. Ladies are interesting. Ladies are amazing. Ladies are strong people. And God made a lady. He told Adam it wasn't good for him to be alone. So then he made woman and declared, now it is good. So until a woman was added to man, it wasn't good. But once woman was made, she was made, and it was all good. So we are the good part of man. Before I get myself into any more trouble there. So let's have a look. Right. It's good morning, Christelle. Christelle, could you read Numbers chapter 6, verses 1 to 8? Could I have Jennifer, are you able to read as well? We'll have Judges chapter 16, and we're going to read all of it. And I know it's going to take a bit of time. So chapter 4 to chapter 10.
That's what you want me to read, Judges
Yes.
4 to 10.
Yes, please. And I'll get Pam to read chapter. Is it okay, Pam? Can you read from Judges chapter 16, verses 11 to 20? So I'll split it because there's quite a few verses. Thank you.
So am I up first, Michelle?
Yes, please.
And that was Numbers 6, 1 to 8.
8. Yes, please.
Thank you. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the children of Israel and say to them, when either a man or a woman consecrates an offering to take the vow of a Nazirite to separate himself to the Lord, he shall separate himself from wine and similar drink. He shall drink neither vinegar made from wine nor vinegar made from similar drink. Neither shall he drink any grape juice, nor eat fresh grapes or raisins. All the days of his separation he shall eat nothing that is produced by the grapevine, from seed to skin. All the days of the vow of his separation no razor shall come upon his head, until the days are fulfilled for which he separated himself to the Lord, he shall be holy. Then he shall let the locks of his hair then he shall let the locks of the hair of his head grow. All the days that he separates himself to the Lord, he shall not go near a dead body. He shall not make himself unclean, even for his father or his mother, or his brother or his sister, when they die, because his separation to God is on his head. All the days of his separation, he shall be holy to the Lord.
Thank you. That was lovely. Jennifer, we're going to jump over to Judges now, and we're going to get the story.
Okay. Delilah said to Samson, you're making fun of me, telling me lies. Now come on, tell me what it takes to tie you up. All it takes, he answered, is to tie me up with new ropes that haven't been used.
Sorry,
Then I'll be
Jennifer, sorry, is that
verse
4?
Sorry. Okay. After this, he fell in love with a woman who lived in the Sorek Valley, whose name was Delilah. The chiefs of the Philistine went up to her and said, coax him into telling you where his great strength comes from and how we can overcome him, so that we can tie him up and subdue him. If you do, each of us will give you 1,100 pieces of silver. Delilah said to Samson, please tell me what it is that makes you so strong and how someone could tie you up and subdue you. He answered, if they tie me up with 7 fresh bowstrings that have never been dried, I will become as weak as any other man. The chiefs of the Philistine brought up to her 7 fresh bowstrings, which had not been dried, and she tied him up with them. Now she had people lying in wait in the inside room. So she said to him, Samson, the Philistine have come for you. But he snapped the bowstrings as easily as a piece of straw breaks when it touches fire, and the source of his strength remained unknown. Delilah said to him, you're making fun of me, telling me lies. Now come on, tell me what it takes to tie you up.
Thank you, Pam.
And he said to her, if I will be tied up with new ropes, with which no work has been done, then I shall become weak and be as any man. And Delilah took new ropes and bound him with them and said to him, the Philistines have come upon you, Samson. And the ambushers were staying in the room. And he tore them from his arms like a thread. And Delilah said to Samson, until now you have mocked me and told me lies. Tell me with what you may be tied up. And he said to her, if you weave the 7 locks of my head to a roller. And she fastened it with a peg and said to him, the Philistines have come upon you, Samson. And he woke from his sleep and plucked away the peg of the web and the roller. And she said to him, how can you say, I love you, while your heart is not with me? These 3 times you have mocked me, and you have not told me wherein is your strength so great. And it was as she nagged him with her words every day and pressed him that his soul was vexed to death. And he told her all his heart and said to her, a razor has not come upon my head, for I am a Nazirite to God from my mother's womb. If I will be shaven, then my strength will leave me, and I shall become weak and be like any man. And Delilah saw that he had told her all his heart, and she sent and called the lords of the Philistines, saying, come up this time, for he has told me all in his heart. And the lords of the Philistines came up to her and brought the money in their hands. She put him to sleep upon her knees, and she called to a man, and she shaved off the 7 locks of his head, and she began to afflict him, and his strength left him. And she said, the Philistines have come upon you, Samson. And he woke from his sleep and said, I will go out as at other times, and I will shake myself. But he did not know that the Lord had departed from him.
Thank you. That was great reading, everyone. And I know it was long. So here we are. Samson is a Nazirite, but God has a purpose for him as well. He is actually the judge, the prophet, and the deliverer of the Israelite people. And he is judging at this time. The Philistines had been coming against the Israelites for 40 years. And Samson judges for the 20 of those 40 years, but God had had enough, and therefore he needed a deliverer. And so he looked to Manoah and his wife and to produce this son called Samson that would be one after his own heart from the time he is in the womb for his the life of the vow. Now, the vow, we've done this before, and we've said that an oath is a solemn promise with divine intent, and a vow is a solemn promise with action. And so as long as the vow is in operation, they adhere to the strict rules of the law of a Nazirite or a Nazir. And so what happens is he has already married a woman, and the woman of Timnah, she has no name, and she is a Philistine, and he was told to marry her. Well, he told his parents, get me this woman, and the Lord allowed it. So last year we talked on the woman of Timnah, and that's where she's from, and then she is actually killed by the Philistines, but at the wedding he proposed a riddle and to the Philistine men, and what happened was they didn't know it, and so they actually challenged her and tormented her and nagged her in her own wedding to actually get the answer from Samson. So and now we see here he is, after all this time, he ends up finding this woman and he loves her. So we're just setting the scene. So after many years, this is a woman he's come across. So let's find out who she is and which tribe she belongs to, or people group she belongs to, and if he did actually, in fact, marry her. Because the consensus, if you know the story, how many of you would have thought that they were married? That's the way you've been taught. So I was taught that. So anyway, we're going to find out if that is so. And it's really, really interesting that this story, whilst we've probably read it many times, it's as interesting with what isn't said than what is said. So just some teasers for you there. So let's look at the name of Delilah. Would you believe that this is a Hebrew name? She is actually, and it means hanger, vertical transporter, diminished. Now, this is the negative aspect, because every time I read about this lady, she is considered a bad girl in the Bible. And it's like, yeah, at times we can be bad girls. And at other times we can be those lovely ladies and women who are strong and determined. But it also means delicate or dainty one. So here she has these two sides to her name. And she lives, of course, in the valley of Sorek. So, and we'll just leave that for the moment. And it looks like, so they've taken her name from the verb dalal, meaning to be low or hang down. And she said that her name, she lives up to her name because she diminishes as Samson. Now, Samson has been going around the countryside of Philistia, and he's been doing these great deeds of strength. He'd already killed approximately, that we know of, 1,030 men as well. And so they didn't have weapons, and he did it with the jawbone or whatever he could find. It was very interesting. So the Philistines actually knew that this man was a thorn in their side, and he had afflicted them. And so what they wanted to do was afflict him, but they couldn't give him a frontal assault. They tried. So they decided that they would go through a woman. It seemed that Samson's weakness was foreign women, but particularly Philistine women, because that is what God had called him, and his purpose was to defeat the Philistines. So he basically put Samson in the midst of the Philistines. Hi, Emily. It's lovely to see you as well. So it's talking about retrieving water. It can be like it can be that she retrieves water or a traveling bucket, but it's just that it means that it can be floral hangers or olive branches, that she could have been this amazing, amazing woman. But she makes a decision, and the decision is interesting, how God uses her for his purpose, because she makes a decision, and that is to come into agreement with the Philistine lords. So I'm just doing an overview here. So her other name, so she means delicate, hanger, vertical transport, to languish, to hang low. Delilah it's a play on the Hebrew word Laylah, L-A-Y-L-A-H, which means night. It can also mean flirtatious and sexy. So I'm just going to go there. The timeline, because we're looking at 1118 to 1078. So 1118 to 1078 was this timeline when this occurred. And some of them are in the 12s, so it's an approximate. But it's really, really interesting when we look at women, when they are in the timeline, are they any different to who we are today? Do we use, this is all about strength and power. It's almost a power struggle, a strength on strength. Is it the strength of physical ability, as in Samson? Is it the strength of pride? Is it the strength of emotional ability? Is it the strength of wills here? It's interesting to see it from a man's perspective and a woman's perspective, how it's used negatively. Now, Samson tormented and taunted the Philistine men. He did it at his wedding with the riddle, and he took great delight in doing it. And now with Delilah, through the story we've just read, he again delighted in tormenting her and taunting her with his teasing. Now, whether it was funny or not, nobody was laughing here, and she certainly wasn't. Whereas with the woman from Timnah, his wife, she actually nagged him because she was in fear of her life. And here we see that Delilah actually comes into agreement. She makes a contract with the Philistine lords to actually find out the strength of Samson. Where does that come from? So we see this tug of war between male and female, between wills, between even fear, the level of fear that we see, because she has taken something which happens to be money to complete a contract. And it's very interesting that she is not given the money until the contract is completed. If you've taken, so we write down in verse 20 here. So where is she? And so let's have a look at our screen. Up it pops. So she is from Wadi Sorek, the Valley of Sorek here. And I've got, this one's a little far away. So it's one of the most important drainage basins in the Jordan Valley. So it's a very agricultural area. It is mentioned in this place alone as the border between the ancient Philistines and the tribe of Dan, the ancient Israelites. So here is Philistia. So here is Timnah, where he married. Here is Dan. So it's a boundary or a border. So here is Lehi, where he killed the 1,000 men. He goes down to Ashkelon and kills the 30 men during his wedding to fulfill the requirement of the riddle. He then goes to the woman at Gaza, and we are not bringing her at. So she fits in between this story at the beginning of chapter 16 of Judges, but because the woman of Timnah, his wife, and Delilah both have a similar story. And then he takes the gates, of course, of Gaza to Hebron. So let me show you the next one. Here we are. This is better. And here's the Valley of Sorek here, but it's a long mountain range on either side. So here's Dan. Here's Philistia, Ashkelon, Gaza. He was born between Zorah and Eshtaol. Here, here's Lehi and Timnah. So let's go to our next one. Right, this is better. It's just a sketch, but it's better. So we have on the Israelite side, we have the mountain range. In the middle is the Valley of Sorek. This is the Sorek River. And here we have another mountain range. Here's Timnah, and this is the boundary. This is Dan, this is the Philistines, and this is the boundary. And she is from somewhere in this valley. Samson is from the tribe of Dan. He's a Danite. So this is what it looks like today. This is the Valley of Sorek. So here we have the hills on one side, the hills on another, and this valley, it's agricultural. The river of Sorek Sorek River goes through it. It's very vital today. There used to be a big train go through that and join. Let me go back. There we all are, and used to join between Jaffa or Joppa and Jerusalem. It was a major connection, and it's called Nahal, Nahal, Sorek today. And it's about 20 kilometers or 12 miles southwest of Jerusalem. Are we traveling? Any questions so far? No. So who is she? After 20 years of judging and protecting Israel, Samson falls in love with Delilah, this woman. She is beautiful. We haven't had an ugly woman. I'm sorry. We just have not had that. Behaviors might be a little bit ugly at times and disappointing, but she's a beautiful woman. Otherwise, he would not have looked at her, because he's got this thing with the eyes going on. She is smart, confident, savvy, and able. She is portrayed as independent from the men around her. She is named without the context of a male relative or spouse, although her background, true identity remains unclear. Delilah is the only woman named in the Samson story. So in this, only Manoah is named, but out of all the women, she's the only woman that is given a name. Right. So we only have her name, where she resides. There is no knowledge of her family or background. It is considered she is a Gentile woman, maybe a Philistine, or an intermingling. Now, an intermingling is when she's got different parentage. And if she is an Israelite, she should have known that Samson was a Nazirite. Now, whilst they don't know about sitting down and eating with him, the long hair in the 7 locks should have alerted any Hebrew person or Israelite that he was doing a Nazirite vow, or he was a Nazir. So let's look at what it doesn't say. So the story does not call her a harlot or a prostitute. It is implied. Delilah is not even called a Philistine. It is implied. It doesn't say that she was seeing other men. It is implied. All the messages and stories that I read had her married, had her a Philistine, and had her in a very negative light. So I just looked at that and I thought, let's throw this in, because just think about it. What it doesn't say is just as important as what it does. She is portrayed as a femme fatale. In other words, that she's a woman that uses her appearance to attract men. Now, ladies, we do actually need to use our appearance to attract men, because men see with their eyes, their senses and that. But this was beyond what you would normally do. So she's considered this femme fatale, that men fall at her feet type of thing and are attracted. But it doesn't say that she had other men. It said Samson loved her, and we just get this story between Samson and Delilah and the Philistine lords. This very snapshot of her. She and Samson apparently are lovers, but are they married? Now, this is interesting. Do you think they're married? From the story. Samson falls in love with her, but it doesn't appear to be reciprocated in verse 4. Nowhere in the story does it say that she loves him. It said he loves her. And as it was read, she said, if you love me. So here we are using this terminology to use her abilities to get the information she requires. If you love me, you would do this for me. If you love me, you would do that. So it's this very conditional type of love. It's not a God-given love per se. It's this conditional earthly love. So I looked up that word love in verse 4, and from the Strong's Concordance, it's number 157. In the Hebrew, it means Ahab. We know it as Ahab, but it's pronounced Orhab, and it means to have affection, sexually or otherwise, love, like, or friend. So it's an affection. So he had a deep affection for her. Is it the same as we think, that when we read that he loved her, that it was that all-encompassing love where you're married to this person, you would do anything for this person? Or was it really an affection? And did he visit her because she plies him for an answer day after day after day? This didn't all happen in one day. This happened over a period of time. For many days, it says. She is swayed by the Philistines to find the source of Samson's strength in verse 5. And the Philistines are the enemies of the Israelites. They have taken away their weapons. They have made them virtually slave-like to them. And they have harassed and tormented and not been very kind at all. And this is the process of an enemy. So, is she a concubine or a courtesan? Because she is approached by the Philistine lords. Could she have been a courtesan? Could she have been a concubine? Did she live in her own home? It appears so, that she lives in her own home. Is she a courtesan? We don't know. Is she a concubine? Well, it doesn't say. So there's a lot that it doesn't say, but it is probable that she could have been any one of them. In verse 18, it says, she went and called for the Philistine lords. She went and called for them. So she had this relationship. She's a formidable feminine weapon. And this is not an offensive thing to say. This is what she was used for. This lady was used by the Philistines, and she used for to get Samson because they wanted to afflict him. She used the Philistines for money. Didn't she have any money? Was she poor? So it says a lot about, was she married? Now, with the woman of Timnah, there was a wedding banquet. There was a feast. But in no way in this story do we ever hear of Samson holding a feast or going to a feast and a wedding ceremony for Delilah. Any comments? Yes, Jennifer.
I don't think they were married, and I think that he was just besotted and, just completely led by lust, really. And how could he be so stupid to, 3 times she conned, he knew that what she was going to do, he was attacked by the Philistines 3 times, and he still went and told her. I don't know what he was thinking. Really.
It does
Really?
tend to lean towards that way, doesn't it? That he looks like he's coming across as in a word, dumb, doesn't it? He's a dumb man. But really, or does he have so much faith in his ability that he just dismisses her? What do you think, Norma?
Can you hear me?
Yes, thanks.
Well, to put it nicely, I think he was completely naive to day after day he must surely have known what she was up to. And it says that there were men in the room who pounced on him. Now, if that happened to a man like Samson once, surely he would never allow it to happen a second time. I don't think he was stupid. I don't think God would have used him if he'd been stupid. So he was either infatuated with her, or maybe he was trying to show off. It's hard to understand, isn't it? But
it is.
And I don't think she could have had feelings for him to have treated him like that, knowing what was coming up.
Well, let me ask this question. Would a wife treat her husband that way? Emily says, reminds me of the continued parallel in Bible between faithful and adulterous women. Yes, it does, because they liken her to Jael, who killed Sisera. But that was for the benefit of Israel as well. And it doesn't look like that for her that this was the benefit for Israel, in that she was the one that was being benefited here, not Samson. But in the end, God uses her because she thinks she's just doing this for herself, but she doesn't realize behind all of this who prevails here. But it's also, we're going to get into the negative aspect of her. Anybody else got a comment on this?
Just like going on from like that parallel between the like adulterous woman and the faithful woman. Also, like she's quite, in her character, like manipulative and deceptive. Like, and it talks about like throughout Proverbs, and like the prophets as well, like Israel's like been deceived and they've gone off with harlots and they're been like deceived by like a false truth or like a lie. And like I think that's kind of what she's doing to Samson, is that she's using like her charm to like manipulate and deceive him into believing a lie.
That's a great pickup. And yes, you are. That's a leaning, because that's where we're going, because now we're going to go to the negative aspect, because that's how she really is portrayed. And she is actually considered a formidable feminine weapon. She is the heartless wrecker of a mighty man. It really got quite. She is a treacherous woman. And that actually came from both women and men, that she was treacherous, because if she was an Israelite, okay, thanks, Jennifer. If she was an Israelite and she was his wife, surely she would have treated him a little bit differently. She would not have betrayed him. And if she did betray him, she would have had to been enticed. Because if we look at all the other ladies, they treated their husbands a little bit differently. I was thinking of Lot's wife. Now, she was actually a mean lady and she had this disregard. But as Norma said, it was infatuation. As the Strongs brought out, it was an affection or a deep affection that he had for her, rather than this all-encompassing love in a marriage type setting. And it appears that Samson didn't upkeep this lady at all. She wasn't put into a house that he provided for her. She seems to have done that for herself. And of course, if she was a courtesan, and that she would have been put into a house somewhere off the palace, that type of thing. And usually a concubine lived with the husband, not the other way around. It seems that, is she a Philistine? It is plausible to actually say, yes, she's most likely definitely a Gentile and probably a Philistine as well.
In that culture as well, like in marriage, the husband would have had like total control and authority over his wife. Like they often would refer to them as like my lord. And so it would seem like for that culture, like very, like could she have got away with doing that? Like wouldn't the husband's husband's like word was law kind of thing?
It is, but the other thing is we've also had women whose husbands spoke to them and actually took their advice. We've also had women as well. There is a perception that the husband is lording it over the woman, but we know that the woman still had to consent to the marriage. So the husband, she could decline. So in a way, she could actually have had a relatable a relationship in that she could be both able to speak to her husband, able to be considered, had her understanding, because his mother, Samson's mother and father, both spoke to each other. Both, if you read the story, they were actually husband and wife. They actually spoke to one another. The angel came to visit, and his wife goes and tells Manoah what's happened. We don't hear anything like that in this relationship at all. So we do have this lady using her feminine wiles to manipulate Samson, as you said, Emily, to get the information for others. So if Samson could have controlled himself, then Delilah would have had no power over him. She said, if you love me, therefore that gives her power, gives her strength. She had been having this relationship with Samson, and when he became a threat to the Philistines, she was approached by the Philistine lords. Before that, she doesn't render a mention. So this was an ongoing relationship which was already active, and then when the Philistines couldn't get Samson directly, they used an indirect method and this woman. So it's always, so I've looked at, is she married? So we've touched on it, and we're going to have a look at it strongly. So according to Who's Who of the Bible, and I forgot to look up SV, it's one of the contributors, Samson having already shown his propensity for fickleness, fell foul of her snare, and they were married. So from a male perspective, and even rabbinical perspective, the rabbis believed she was married. So her intrigue leads to Samson's bondage, blindness, and death. The rabbis view this story in a negative light, and their commentary is that Samson married Delilah. When he allowed his spiritual state to become diminished, did God permit him to lose his strength and become publicly humiliated captive? Because it's really, when it says the Lord, in verse 20, the Lord departed from him. So it looks like that the power is that prevails here. You will see that it is God in control of all of this. But when you're in the story, it seems that you're in control. Is Delilah in control, or is Samson in control? Samson believes he is in control. No matter what she does to him, he's taunting her, he's tormenting her. He says, tie me up, weave my hair, and he's lying to her, and he's going to wake up. She goes, behold, the Philistines, because they're just in the room, aren't they? And he wakes up and everything's broken. So he just believes in the power of his ability of his hair. Now, the hair is a sign of his Nazirite status. And
Michelle,
it says, yes,
Michelle, I'm sorry. When you said that Delilah, that she was married, you didn't mean that she was married to Samson?
Well,
She was.
Yes, according to the men, the rabbis, according to the rabbis, they believe she was married. Not only do they believe she was married, that she was Jewish. And I went, okay. So according to Nissa Mindel from Shabbat.org, Samson married again a Philistine woman called Delilah, and she became a Jewess.
Oh, she converted.
Yes. And so she converted. And I just go, right. So they believe she is married, that he actually had 2 wives. And I just looked at it and I went, okay, you make up your own mind. What do you reckon, Pam?
Okay, I'm just quietly listening. that makes sense. If the Jewish people think that Samson had 2 wives, well, to me, this is the whole over picture of what's happening, because it's at the wheat harvest that he comes back. He's at Pentecost, so that he comes back and finds his first wife's father had given away his wife. So that wife didn't want to become the bride. And so if the second Delilah wants to become the bride, if the Jewish people think that she converted, well, she hasn't held her conversion. It was a false conversion. And so she's tricked Samson because her heart was never in the conversion. So she's not going to be the bride. So for my concept, it's she's the harlot bride. And so she's not coming into the faith. And so this Pentecost, the brides, the harvest and stuff, it's all one big picture.
Thank you. That's it does tend to lean you. This is actually a prophet's portion. So I'm trying not to go into the prophetic, but you've touched on it today. And yes, it does do that. It's you've actually touched on the prophet's perspective today, and with the whole Israelites, because he is the deliverer. He was born to be the deliverer of the Israelite people from the Philistines. And so Delilah becomes the catalyst for the Lord's purpose to come about, to free the Israelite people, because they have been basically emasculated and emancipated because they've been de-weaponized, haven't they? And so he looks for an alternative. And she is the person that has been found. Delilah could not resist the offer of wealth, and they call her a heartless, I'm going to use the word person, because she agrees to sell her husband's life for 1,100 pieces of silver, and not just 1,100 pieces of silver from each lord that came to her. So it was quite a large sum of money she sells her husband's information for. And so where does the prostitute come in? So Pam has led us into that. And yes, it comes from, if you can purchase sexual favors from a prostitute, therefore what's the difference? Is this a bribe? And the Jewish people render it a bribe rather than paying for sexual favors. So is she an actual prostitute? It does not say, but as Pam said, she represents the people, Israelite people, or the bride as a prostitute or a harlot bride. So the scriptures do not say how many lords turned up. It's worth, the 1,100 pieces of silver is worth 100 days of wages, 100 days for the secret of his strength. A large sum of money. And this was an agreement or a contract between her and the Philistine lords.
Michelle,
Yes.
excuse me. What do you mean when you said that she was a catalyst to free the Israelites? What do you mean?
She was used as an agent. So an agent, a go-between.
No, I know what the words mean, but I don't know what you mean by how was she an agent to do that?
So because she's this go-between, and they use someone else. It's like when you buy a house, you get an agent to help you buy a house. But
but the Israelites weren't not free, were they? Are you saying that they weren't free at this time?
They were free, but they were still being, the Philistines still came and had power over them. And so what God did was they couldn't do it directly, so they used her, and it's said she's an agent, or she is the one being used here to actually afflict Samson, because he was the one that was coming against them. And so she is, for me, a catalyst in that she joins Samson with the Philistines. So they've used an intermediary. It might be my understanding of the scriptures, but I see her as important because without her, the Philistines would not have defeated Samson. Their whole aim was to defeat Samson because he was the one standing in their way. And
how
he
does
was
that free the Israelites? I still don't get it. Because Samson was an Israelite,
yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
and
my understanding
I'm
is.
confused by
Oh, sorry.
What you've I understand the words. I understand what a catalyst and the intermediary. I understand. I just don't get what you're talking about. Oh, you say that. That's all.
Yes.
Sorry. Someone else.
Yes.
Sorry.
By her giving him over to the Philistines, the Philistines still have control over the Israelites at this, because I'm trying not to go to the prophetic, and he still has control. He is in 40 years. He is a judge in those 40 years. But he rules and reigns. He's the last judge, as far as the next judge is a priest judge. He's the last true judge like that, and he's ruling, and he's coming against the Philistines as a single person, but they still are afflicting, wanting to afflict the Israelites. And so he is standing in their way to afflict the Israelites fully to do that.
Well, yes. So I don't, I get that. That's why I'm confused by how it's for freeing of the Israelites. I would think that it's actually putting them under further kind of subjugation.
Yes, but when we get to the end, when he gets captured, she is used to get him to be captured. And so they want the power, so they want the strength in the end. And he gets, so let me stop.
He pulls it all down over them and over the Philistines. And
yes, so we haven't got to the end yet. We're still in the middle of the story.
Right, so that's the freedom part at the end.
You're at the end.
Oh, I know. Well, had you not mentioned that, I wouldn't have. I was just
sorry, but that's a good
point.
thing, because you're at the end, and that's where we want to get to. That she ends up being the catalyst. In other words, he gets captured, his eyes get taken out, he gets put between the two pillars. So we see this whole strength and the power and who's going to prevail here. She thinks at this time she's prevailing. He thinks he's prevailing. But actually God says there's a time for everything. As we see in Ecclesiastes, there's a time for everything under the sun. And so what happens is he gets between the two pillars and he pulls them down, and he kills more Philistines then. And they actually do become free after that. So we're just at the payment section. So we've just jumped to the end because it is getting time.
Sorry.
But it is an actual. So Delilah accepts a bribe to reveal the source of Samson's strength to the Philistines. And each of the Philistine rulers, they think it's probably 5 of them, because that's represent the 5 important Philistine cities. And they pay her this money. And so she does not actually love him. It's not reciprocated. And she has no qualms in actually taking the money. She has no hesitation in handing him over and betraying him. He, of course, believes everything is in his hair. The strength is in his hair. She actually finally finds out that he's a Nazirite. Now, here is another woman who betrays him, but this time for money. This plan to entrap or snare him was quite premeditated, and she had the men waiting for the outcome of the information concealed within her room. She was, in a way, that's why I said she was savvy and she was able, because who actually has men waiting in the room to pounce on a person? And we see that in Judges 16:5, where it says entice him. In other words, use your female wiles. And then in Judges 16:15, it says, that whole saying of how can you say I love you when your heart is not with me? So if they were married, the hearts would have been joined together. But here we have actually two individual people, two separate people. And she is saying, your heart is not with me because you've mocked me. And this is his nature to do that, to mock her. And so Delilah lulls Samson into a false sense of security before she tests what he says is true. So he gets to the point where she has vexed him unto death, he says, and that means to annoy, to frustrate, to irritate day after day. In Judges 16, she's brought this vexation upon him. I've seen all the works that are done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity and vexation of spirit, according to Ecclesiastes 1 verses 14. And then she'd say in Judges 16, she said, the Philistines are upon you, Samson. And he awoke out of his sleep and said, I will go out as I have done time after time and shake myself free. For he did not know that the Lord had departed from him. Once he confessed the truth, it's not until he divulges that he is a Nazirite and speaks the truth, as in verse 17, that his strength leaves. Because his true strength comes from the Lord, Delilah did not know that he was a Nazirite and therefore was more likely to be a Philistine woman. Did she negate his Nazirite status? Well, the whole thing is she didn't, in that God put him in a position because of his weaknesses. God used those weaknesses to put him in a position under this woman to actually end the vow. It's a big statement, isn't it, to say that? The rabbis describe Delilah as robbing Samson of his masculinity, strength, intellect, and religion, and also explore how she robbed him of his intended path in life, that of a Nazirite. But did she? That's the question. Did she? Or did she only contribute to it? Did he actually was walking along that path already? And she was a contributing factor. Do you agree with that statement? He too thought his strength and power came from not cutting his hair, a sign that he was a Nazirite. But actually his strength and power came from the Holy Spirit that would come upon him at the needed time. According to Ramban or Maimonides, he says Samson's strength was a divine gift from God so that he could help the Jewish people, but such divine assistance was contingent on his total devotion that was symbolized by his acceptance of the restrictions of the Nazirite. Thus, when his piety began to wane and he let himself be attracted by the beauty of the Philistine women, God's assistance gradually deserted him, and this process was climaxed by the removal of his hair. He was now in that position. So she was a woman of persistence and deception who had personal charm, mental ability, self-command and nerves, but who used all her qualities for one purpose. It was said for money. Her allegiance appears to be that of the Philistine and not towards Samson. Any questions? This truly is a woman who could have used all of herself for the Lord. And in a way, God used her in a way for his purpose because of her attributes. And her attributes are actually good ones. She is savvy. She is able. She is confident. She is switched on. And she is in command of herself. These are all good attributes. These are wonderful, wonderful things to have. It's the way you use your abilities and for what purpose that puts you in a good light or a negative light, isn't it? It's how you want to be and how you want to see yourself. And do you go about life tricking people, taunting people, tormenting people to get your own way and using that sort of strength? Or do you have the strength of the Lord residing within you and that outworks itself and therefore you become helpful? The fruit of the Spirit is love, peace, joy, peace, goodness, kindness, long-suffering, patience, self-control, and gentleness. Was she any of these things? And I'm going to leave you with that. Any further comments? It is 11 o'clock and we've run out of time. I hope you've enjoyed Delilah. Go back and have a look at her and have a look at and fresh eyes and ask yourself questions. We'll see you all again next week. Don't forget to join us on the TorahPortion.org for this Saturday with Pastor Greg Cummings, 9:30 a.m. to 11 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. Bye.